Namaste. Following up on my last conversation with Anand Prasad, last time we left off with a hook on speaking about Murti Puja and Yantras and Mantras. So that is where we'll delve a bit in this conversation.
So where we left off last time in our debate was the Devta idea and things like that. What we can do for people like us who are not scripturally learned, who are on the more sort of modern path, seeking to understand things better, seeking to essentially enjoy the benefits of having born in this land, is to look for that core essence. And in the pursuit of that core essence, you will see it will come in mixed forms. So you have to separate the chaff from the grain. You don't have to be critical, you don't have to accept the chaff, you don't have to criticize it. And we tend to, when we criticize, we tend to throw the baby out of the bathwater, but just can grab the essence. So there will be times where some preachers or some speakers will, as I say, hit the ball out of the stadium or go over the top. And ignore the going over the top, just grab what is essential, what is more important, and in your own head start putting together a picture that connects logically in that sense. And then seek to experience. Now, in that stage, and I'll give a bit of my own experience, is that given that we live in a rational world, and me coming from a rational sort of background, essentially was massively interested in the Advaitin philosophy. So, did a lot of reading on Advaita, did a lot of conversations with people. I didn't go to so much lectures because I always found that there's more chaff than grain, so it would end up being boring. So, but I did my own reading and putting pieces together. Very stimulating for an intellectual mind.
Yeah.
Extremely. And extremely pleasurable when you do it. In my experience, you go there, and then you get stuck. I don't know if that is the experience for other people, but you get stuck in the sense that you start realizing that every time you read, understand, hear new things, it is the same core that is narrated in a different fashion. So people are just explaining it differently, but it is the same core. So you then, at least my experience, I found that I came to a certain position, then I was stuck. So I asked this question of some people that I know that are stuck, etc. And I was told that you'll stay like that for a while and then it will change. So then came a time where I gave up the idea of ever coming unstuck. So I could speak most things that I'm speaking just now, even at that time. Yes, but they did not come from, it was like the two blind men who did one with slight, one eye had opened up. So you got some of the stuff, but you didn't experience fully.
Yes, so basically you're saying you've intellectually understood some concepts, but what you're possibly missing is an experience of what it tastes like.
So what happens is, you start feeling an emptiness.
Yes, I agree. I get your point. Even in intellectualizing it beyond a point, there is some.
You start feeling hollow because somehow it does not work. It makes sense, you can logically explain it, but there is a hollowness. And at least my own experience is, as you go further with that, I guess if you're lucky, and that's where I see the huge blessing in being born in this land, is that if you were living in America, I don't think it'll happen. I mean, I don't think it can happen. So this is where you'll run into people who can either intentionally or unintentionally open some windows. I'm not even saying open a door, or open a slight slit somewhere, and then you sort of can dive through that. As you dive through that, the feeling of emptiness will no longer be there. All the intellectual ideas will still be there. Sometimes those intellectual ideas, you will understand it differently. And in my space, I would say today, when people discuss Advaitin philosophy, there are all the bogus philosophies. The reason that say that is, I don't think you can get to one level unless you go through that. And what we find in the popular sort of Hindu intellect um, is that shallow conversation around what Advaita is. It is bereft of any flavor to it. It is interesting. I mean, when you don't know, it's very interesting. But it is shallow.
I don't know. Sometimes it can. Okay, maybe I'll give it to you that it could be shallow, but that may be a judgment from a position of having had some experience of it.
Yes.
That's all I'm saying.
I do not disagree.
Yes.
Our Indian state is somewhere stuck in that.
No, Indian state is nowhere even talking of Advaita. It says this is humbug.
But it's somewhere, I would say that it's somewhere in this transition. But it's at that level. What it is doing, therefore, it is denying the existence of anything else. The question that we were looking to discuss was the idea of a Devta or an idea of a deity or an idea of God. The idea of a deity or an idea of a God exists in that other space, which is not in this space. Now, the reason why Advaita is as strong an idea today or as accepted philosophy today is attributed to the Adi Shankara. There are two things of the Adi Shankara's life that you'll hear people say them, but you will see we ignore it because those are in contrast with the whole Advaita idea. Those two are, one, he's having a bath in the Ganga and coming out and he runs into a Chandala and he abuses him. And he says that, what is this, you have spoilt my thing, I have to go and have bath once again. And Chandala says that you are having so much Advaita, and then you are talking like this. So you are actually living in a Dvaita world. You are recognizing duality. You talk about single existence, but your core is one that recognizes duality. And then the story is that Shankara falls at his feet and says, you are Shiva. I mean, everybody is Shiva by that logic, by Advaitin basis, but essentially it's a Chandala that brings that recognition to him. There is the other story of somewhere in Kashmir, a tantric does something to Adi Shankara. So he gets stuck somewhere. I'm not exactly sure what happens to him, but he basically gets stuck. And then somebody else tells him that you need to go to the Devi. And he then goes down that path and sort of unwinds himself and comes out of the knots that he had been tied up in. But essentially that results in Shankara formulating the Saundarya Lahari. The Saundarya Lahari, now when you talk in terms of sexuality and how we look at our goddesses, the Saundarya Lahari has in various verses a sexual description of the goddess, or what you might consider sexual
In our current modern context.
in a modern context. But that is the woman in a full. He is looking at the goddess in a full. He is describing. So there are descriptions of how her lips are, how her breasts are, how her hips are, etc. So it comes as a bit of a shock. So when somebody first mentioned it to me, I didn't take it for face value. I went and purchased one Saundarya Lahari. Of course, it was the English version, and I read, and they were paras of that nature. So Adi Shankara, who is now both your experience of the goddess as well as the experience of the Chandala are Dvaita in nature. Now, when you find people so casually talk about the God is, what is it? Vasudeva Kutumbakam, or the God is omnipresent, and it is right. But it is not relevant, I suspect, to each one of us, because even the Adi Shankara could not stay true to that complete Advaitin idea. He had to experience the Dvaitin, he had to experience the goddess, he had to experience the Chandala. Those are true elements. The fact that a Brahman exists is true, but it has no applicability, which is why I call it basically not a useful construct. Unless you are down that path. So unless you are in deep meditative state, And maybe it has some implication over there, but in a practical life, so I see a lot of swamis saying this has practical utility. It has no practical utility. The fact that why you telling me your knowledge should be my knowledge and both of us should not exist. So the fact that you're even telling me is a recognition of the duality. And therefore, you would look at it, that's the first distinction I would make, because essentially we think of ourselves in more Advait in terms. The popular conversation is in Advait in terms. And we immediately, one of the criticisms, immediately you talk about it like this, but you go to temples, you're looking at deities, you're doing puja. Why are you doing that if this is it? The reason is that is the truth. This is also the truth. So it's got the explanation for why both are true lies in the nature of saying the dual nature of matter. That the table is both here as well as it is wave. Which is the way I sort of would like to describe it, is that our idea of deities is, and this is again scriptural, so some of it you will experience, you'll probably experience parts of it, but most of us won't get that full Brahman experience. Is that to answer the question, does a deity exist? I would say, given you look at science and you look at what we were just describing, is that Advaita to the existence of duality, is that the universe does exist. Practically, we experience the universe. I'm saying that the existence of multiple dimensions of the universe also exists. They are to insist that you can insist saying that my physical experience is that I am in a three-dimensional world, maybe right. It's like, I would say it's like two blind men having a conversation, but they are beings beyond just our three-dimensional world who you can experience in parts in three dimension, but they essentially exist in higher dimensions. Our construct of the Devtas or the gods is of beings in those levels. The only way for us to, in a mathematical sense, be able to prove it is if we have got to locate the maths. Either we come up with the maths afresh or we locate it. I think cutting edge science in terms of theoretical physics is taking it in that direction. It's not looking at deities and gods and the existence of intelligent beings or sentient beings in those other dimensions. But a lot of science fiction has issues like that, and science typically ends up catching up with science fiction. That's been our experience as well. So there will come a time where modern science will be able to interact with these sentient beings. So to answer the question, as long as you can experience it, the sentient being will exist. If you can't experience it, then it is only the nature of belief. And it's an interesting path. I'm not saying this is what you have to do. You can be whichever, but an interesting path is to transition in the realm of trying to experience those sentient beings. Once you experience, it doesn't matter what somebody else says, your experience will be true. Like John Nash's. That is really your experience. Everybody else will say that is bogus, it is part of imagination. Who knows whether it is part of my imagination or not, but it is actually my experience. The next level is that how do you sometimes demonstrate? It's not meant for demonstration. I'm having this experience. Now, what use is that experience? So, in Beautiful Mind, Nash doesn't use these experiences for anything in particular. There is no structure. He just sees these people, he interacts with them, but they are not useful in his regular life. We've been able to, in India or at some point in time, the pagans and this existed again across the world, were able to develop technology that allowed you to work with those beings.
For your own benefit, for the benefit of your lives and your community and whatever else.
Now, the confusion occurs when we start ascribing the word all powerful to a sentient being. because that's the Semitic construct, all powerful God. So when we use the term God, we ascribe all powerful here.
So basically, Allah is a deity.
I'm not commenting, but that's the notion that we ascribe in India, because we tend to use that. A lot of intellectual class is English speaking. Anybody who doesn't speak English is intellectual nahi ho sakte. So we ascribe the notion of an all powerful to every deity. That is very akin to saying that there is a highly effective plumber. I can call a plumber, he can come and fix things, he can come and fix plumbing, but he cannot fix electrical faults. All powerful will mean that this guy must be able to fix everything. We ascribe the need to fix everything to a deity. No, these are specialists.
This I've come partly because of conversations with you and then learning from Sino Joseph. This has been a wonderful realization for me that personally and being a little vulnerable here and sounding like a fool or whatever, this whole notion of going to, sorry, I'm trying to articulate and figure out my thought, but Sadhguru said something very interesting during the Linga Bhairavi consecration. So firstly, see, this whole connection with Shiva, and an abstract aspect of Shiva, an Advaitic aspect that we are all Shiva, firstly is intellectually very, very stimulating. It is also a very powerful way of living also. I mean, it's useful. I sort of disagree with it that it's not useful. It's useful because just in everyday life, if I were to write, or fold my hands to somebody, the idea of namaste is the divine in me is bowing to the divine in you is actually a very, I don't know, an Advaitic, whether you categorize it as Dwaita or whatever. I'm recognizing there are two, but finally at least intellectualizing that basically there is one, there is no other.
So,
and just that way of living is very beautiful.
So I should just clarify this a bit, because I realize that what I said may sound in a particular fashion. So when I say bogus, Advaita idea is bogus, let me preface it by saying that as you follow an Advaitin principle, and as you, with the Advaitin perspective, go into a meditative state, what is meditation is a different conversation, but if you can expand yourself into that state, it's a very interesting experience. So when I say it is useless, it is which is why I say that if you carry on in that path, then it is useful. Then it is extremely powerful.
Yes, maybe it's this whole construct of pravritti marg and nivritti marg. And I have started looking at the whole idea of Devi versus this Brahman, if you like, from that construct, and it's a very powerful construct to frame.
So when you go down that pure Advaitin path, it is extremely stimulating. Almost, I mean, I don't know anybody that is down that path, quite honestly. That is not to say that my knowledge is be all and end all. So there are many people who are down that path. There are many highly elevated beings that have no need to express. When you come into their vicinity, your answers will just start popping up in your head. So those are pure Advaitin. But we don't function at that level. We function at a level where I need to drink the coffee and or I need to smell the coffee.
See, I understand, but even I would not discount that. But anyways, in my experience, I started from there, which is how Sadhguru's whole orientation with the Shivalinga and the 7 chakras and all of that. I wouldn't disregard some of that, just being in meditation, and that it brings benefit to you. Just a simple act of meditation opens, physically, physiologically, it expands your brain. So perhaps your sense of perception or experience expands. For example, little things like, right, if you sit on a beach, I don't think I have had a profound experience. So for example, fridge of Capra. one of the most profound people who actually impacted my life towards spirituality or Advaita, if you like, was Fritjof Capra, the way you look at life. He, in 1970s, as a nuclear physicist, was sitting at the beach in California, and he says, I saw, in quotes, the dance of Shiva, the rising of the waves and the falling of it, the creation of subatomic particles and the collapsing of them. I feel what he's trying to describe is an experience not dissimilar to what Sadhguru describes when he was at the this Chamundi Hill at Chamundi Hill, right, near Mysore, if I'm not wrong. He says that I lost my sense of body. I basically did not know where my body started and where it ended. The mountain was me, the air was me. Now this is a very beautiful experience, and it has been repeated. The same thing has been repeated by people all the time, over and over in our tradition.
So the reason why I say that it is not useful is that you will always fall out of that experience.
Yes, but you also fall back in that experience.
Also fall back in that experience.
And this is the layers, by the way. I've heard some construct about people who are able to bring that experience back to them by their sadhana, and some people who are not. It happens to them and then they're desperate for it to happen again, and it sort of evades them, if you like, right? But there are some people who are able to bring it back, and at will. Yeah? So, I mean, I would call them realized souls, enlightened, whatever they are, right?
Realize is basically they are more evolved, I would say. They have a greater experience. Their vision is expanded more than, I mean, they can see more than what most of us can see. So when you
construct of samadhi, right, them being able to enter into states where they are able to have that experience of annihilation of the individual at will and enter into samadhi, I'm guessing that is what samadhi means.
Now the challenge is a part of the challenge.
No, but I completely get your point that the whole experience is useless for fulfillment of my life. But that is in the construct of if I'm walking the pravritti marg, which means I'm a grahastha, I have to raise children, I have to suffer in life to reduce my suffering. There is jyotisha, there is visiting a temple, and all of this, Sinu Joseph very beautifully, very, very powerfully correlates to your chakras.
So I can't claim expertise on chakras, but let me describe how maybe that's another conversation on how chakras are, but or how chakras formulate and what is in fact a chakra. But it goes back to how creation happens. How creation happens, how it is described. There is no one scripture called Tantra, but how in Tantra it is understood and in how Sankhya it is explained. Because it's a very different story of creation than the Hiranyagarbha story. But as you sort of, as you look at these beings or these deities and as you experience them, the other element that I was describing is how do you use it in your, is it capable of, I mean, why should I accept that there is something in another dimension? So we found methods to actually get them to do things for us. Now we have got the other notion of saying that God loves me. This is all. So these beings need not love you. Your plumber doesn't have to love you to come and do your work. So we attribute some plumbers might love you, some may not love you, some may, despite being very angry and not wanting to do your work, will still come and do your work. All these sentient beings will lie in this space. We again color them by saying benevolent.
Yes, but that is not an Indian construct, and I've started realizing this is a very Abrahamic construct of benevolent God.
So not benevolent, but these are sort of beings that exist. So the other way of also as a common man who's not going down this path to experience, which is what our civilization was primarily about. It did not require every individual to experience everything. But Our civilization was constructed on the basis that some people can get the plumber to come to your home and fix the plumbing. And therefore, I have the ability, I can do it for you. So, our civilization is constructed on the basis that there are many people, there are some things I'll do myself, and there are many people that can get these beings to come and do things for me.
Be of service to you, and these are essentially the Brahmins of the temples, the priests basically, priests or whoever.
Sadhakas of different
Sadhakas.
kinds. I mean, the Brahmins were better at it because the Brahmins started off at a very young age. The other sadhakas often did not start at a young age. Most sadhakas will say that a Brahmin who does exactly the same that they are doing are better at it. And my explanation for that better is that because they actually started.
Not only started young, but there is of course an element, I would not deny it, is of generational memory, if you like, for the genetic disposition. Yeah.
To do this.
One is genetic, which is of your ancestry, if you like, of course, so one, and the other aspect perhaps is also of the Sukshama sharira. This is a new realization that I'm sort of beginning to understand a little bit better, that when we die, it is not the soul that is transmigrating to a new body. Very beautifully, I just heard video, I don't remember where, that the Sukshama sharir is actually acquiring a new physical body. So it is actually all your accumulated memory and your interaction with the world, the taste, the bad taste, which is nothing but karma, the good and the bad, all of this that you're acquiring, what you've gathered, you're taking to a new body. So and it will continue from there.
So perhaps. Some will describe it as, I'm digressing just now, but it talks to the technology. Is that there is no soul and there is no you. What happens is that there is a bunch of karmas that come together that move collectively. They will call it, the terms used sometimes vasana samskara. Vasana does not mean lust, but it is that inclination which karma has brought together. There is a longer conversation on how does karma come into existence, how the universe, and that's the tantric, the Sankhya approach that I was talking about. But coming back to, so I start deploying these beings. Now, and these beings, so if 3 dimensions can exist, 4 can exist, 5 can exist, 6 can exist, 7 can, so they're basically infinite dimensions in mathematics. Indian scripture, different scriptures will have different dimensions in play, or different levels of existence in play. The more common one is 7 up and 7 down. I have no experience, I can't tell you, otherwise I'm in that context, I'm like the blind man and 2 blind men having conversations. I have to function either on belief, but there is no experience of the 7 dimensions. So they are, the scripture, the technology says that they are different levels. Now part of that technology is over a period of time, scripture will describe it as saying that at some point in time there was no need of idols, no need of temples, and as Kali Yuga began, the need for idols and temples came into existence.
I've heard this repeatedly, I'm not even sure if
I won't get into the logic of things like that, but what is clear is the building of idols. Now, I would assume that this building of idols existed all over the planet, but people have described it in a superficial manner, so it seems as if it is idol worship, etc. But there is actually a process around the world. It was one of energizing. So consecration is not bringing energy from top and putting it in. It is rewiring just that material so that it brings about that energy in it. So that change happens at different levels. Now, initially it started in stones and in wood and in unformed matter or material things. I can't speak to the timing of when mantras and yantras came into existence. I am assuming that it is much before we started using matter. And for various logical reasons, I mean, you can get into debate and I can say that, all right, this is older. But what does the mantra do? What does the yantra do? What does this process do? It is a means to sort of communicate. with these energies or these sentient beings. The question is, I am a being, but I am also energy. Um, so how does somebody communicate with them? At human level, we communicate in one manner, but if you were to communicate somewhere else, we communicate differently. Then the later stage became idols. So you gave form to it. Those got human form or got semi-human form, got, I forget the term, where it is half animal, half man. Sort of all forms came into existence. And so therefore, at some level, so these these are not forms of art. Today we have a lot of deities that look nice or look interesting, but a deity need not look. Deity can look very fierce, can look terrifying, can look different things. But we don't have too many terrifying looking deities, because to our human eyes, they need to look nice and benevolent. But we started doing idol creation in that fashion. Now, so how does somebody create an idol? Is that there is this, it's not an image in clear sense. There's some written instruction, this is how the deity will look, but there is a degree of, there's a leap into another dimension that people who traditionally make idols do. I'm not talking about artists who are doing art, who get into that dimension and they are able to create idol in that nature. Once matter is crafted like that, it is easier to energize it, to meet, to reflect part of what that sentient being is in that other dimension. The older version of this was the same being. Now this is in 3 dimensions. So I've constructed a Ganapati that is in 3 dimensions. If this Ganapati were to become 2-dimensional, let's say if you look at me in 2-dimensional, how would I look? So you compress that into 2 dimensions. That is your Yantra. So it is the same being, it is the same deity as you expand it into. So a Sri Yantra expanded becomes a pyramid into 3 dimensions, but otherwise it shrinks into a Sri Yantra. So the deity in 3 dimensions is the reflection of the Yantra. So you'll find very often in a lot of the older temples, there will be a Yantra placed below the primary deity, the idol. Primary murti. I mean, you can use whatever term you want to, but basically the energy comes from there. The energy can come from some very, very different kinds of things that are unappetizing to hear, even. So it can come from various forms. On top, you might see something benevolent and nice looking, but it might come from a source that culturally to you is unacceptable and revolting. That is its nature. Science has no morality, science has no ethics, science is what it is, it does what it does do. You can like it or not like it, but that is consensual sex can create a child, rape can create a child. So that's the nature of that. When you transpose this into sound level, that is your mantra. So a mantra can get transposed into a yantra, which then brings it from the wave form into 2-dimensional. That can get transposed into 3-dimensional, which is deity. So none of this is a complete reflection of the deity. They are a means, they are a tool to interact with the deity. When you create a temple, or when you in Kerala you use the term kshetram. When you consecrate a kshetra, so you don't consecrate the deity, you consecrate an area. It allows, in that kshetram, it allows easier interaction. It also has an impact on you, so when you go to some of these, you'll feel nicer. None of these are art.
Or like Sino Joseph says, it actually impacts one or more of your chakras actually.
So you can call it chakras, but basically, physically what many of us can experience, you go to a space, you'll suddenly, most of us describe it as, it is peaceful, I feel nice.
Quietening down.
I quieten down. It had beautiful sculpture. This is how we describe these experiences. Oh, that temple looks so beautiful, it's so magnificent, it's so large. We are struggling to find words to describe our experience. Our experience is way beyond, I would suspect, just peace. You describe it as, I'm feeling nice, I'm feeling calm, but those words are insufficient to describe really what you're experiencing. what some people will describe as it is having some impact on your chakras and things like that. So that, going back to after this long conversation, is an answer to what a deity is, what an idol is, what a yantra is, what a mantra is, how do you connect these?
How do you use them?
And they're sort of all interconnected, and how do you use?
How do you use it for the benefit of a human life while remaining in the world?
For the common man, it is how do you use it for benefit? And different deities, some are, for some people, the experience of the deity is the be all and end all. They don't need to use it for anything else. It is just the fact that I've experienced is the end. So I would describe, for me, that is the way I look at it. It's not for any other form of benefit. Just the experience is the be all and end all in itself.
Basically, possibly also because you may be at some place in the Maslow's hierarchy of, or right? So you're not in need for, say, material benefit. And so the experience, which is at the top of the Maslow's pyramid, if you're familiar with
I wouldn't describe myself like that. But that is the different levels at which you can operate. So it's not, when we take the superficial manner of criticizing temple ja rahe ho, you're superstitious, blind faith, etc. That's not, that is you taking a 30,000 view on Indian civilization, 30,000 feet above in the sky, airplane se tum dekh rahe ho, so that is how Indian civilization looks like. But as you come closer, you start looking at the small curves and the changes, and so it's more than 30,000 view. So lot of our intellectual deliberation is at that 30,000 feet level. Is that we don't, and that's my
very judgmental level, also very ridiculing level, and basically all driven from either an Abrahamic idea or a very scientific worldview of that this is dogma and other things.
No, it's a limited scientific view. It's not expansive scientific.
expansive.
An expansive scientific view
Will actually take you to this place.
will take you to this place.